Tell us about your company.
I mean, we do a lot of big shows. Not saying that Squid Game wasn't a big show. Our teams are not allowed to report in terms of confidentiality, but they're just really, really big shows. Like,
oh. Every culture, every generation has a story to tell. The huge popularity of Korea's dramas and movies show the potential of such global content. But translating that content into other languages has always been a great problem. Our Globalists today has taken this challenge and turned it into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that specializes in media localization. Get ready to meet Moo or David Lee, the founder and CEO of Iyuno Group.
제 이름은 똑바로 읽어도 거꾸로 읽어도 우영우입니다. 기러기 토마토 스위스 인도인 별똥별 우영우.
Well, welcome, David, to the Globalist.
well, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
It's an honor for us as well. Tell us about Iyuno. I guess Iyuno is Iyuno. Am I wrong?
Well, that's wouldn't be wrong, but actually, Iyuno was the original founders of Iyuno, which were three of us. The surnames were Yi, Yun, and No. So it was just a mix of
so it's a mix
the three
of the
founders'
surnames.
last names.
Last names,
yeah.
okay.
Sorry. It's
Yeah,
not.
Iyuno is actually a better story
Yeah, that's
to
what I
me.
thought. So, yeah.
But okay, good to know. But tell us about your company. It's the world's largest media localization company. And just to let everybody understand better about your business itself, your clients are the OTT companies, or would they be production companies, or
Everyone.
everyone?
Whomever requires their contents to be
So
localized.
take an example of, let's say, one of the product that you've already worked on.
Okay.
So how would that work? I mean,
You want to name Squid Games? Okay.
Sure.
Well, why not?
Yeah. Okay.
So we would receive, final video files from the production. So we would then run through automated QC, making sure like the video file meets our clients' requirements. We don't want like black scenes in between, or we don't want the audio to be wrong, or so on. So we are the gatekeeper, like it said, in terms of that
quality control.
that validity of that video file itself. And then, of course, we would edit those, compliance edit, for specific countries or languages, pork scenes or political scenes. We would make different versions based on client requirements. So this version goes to, for example, China, this version goes to India, this version goes to elsewhere. And
Do
so
you take into explicit content that is allowed in one country versus the other?
So
kind of
there
things?
may be multiple versions that our clients need because they service multiple countries, right? And then we would go up to our cloud, where it's a secured cloud because content security is very, very important for us, where all of our 67 operations around the world are now accessing, and then project managers would allocate all these 20 different language, and then it would travel into those respective countries, and then they would book translators, book studios, and then they need engineers, they need creative directors. And
For each market?
For each language.
For each
and
language.
voice talents, typically, a show may require 20 talents. So they book 20 talents to come in. And then there's a creative global team where making sure that creative consistency is the same, because, local studios want to interpret the contents in their own way. So for example, like if it's Disney Frozen, Elsa needs to sing like this, but this guy in this country thought that Elsa was a really funny character, so he might want to record in a very funny way. We just need to manage that
make sure
because our purpose is to regenerate the original content creator's intent. So there's a creative director that overlooks all those aspects, and that's why a global player like us is needed from our clients, because they can't manage all that themselves. It's just logistically, it's just impossible. So it's a pretty intensive process.
Wow.
Yeah.
So in terms of if we were taking that Squid Game example, for that your client would have been Netflix?
For example, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was that one of your biggest?
I mean, we do a lot of big shows. Not saying that Squid Game wasn't a big show, but there are shows that we, even myself, in terms of confidentiality, when they actually place orders to our certain teams, certain shows like really big shows like the Lord of Rings or these things, our teams are not allowed to report to me what shows they're working on. So confidentiality and security is very intense. But I think, like I said, we do a lot of theatrical productions as well. There are just a lot of big productions that we do, as well as smaller productions as well.
One of the reasons that I asked this question, because translation, subtitling, dubbing, it doesn't seem to be a highly value-added enterprise.
Right.
I mean, you have grown faster and become bigger in doing what you do than any others. I mean, how have you been able to do it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, because the entrance barrier for the market isn't very high. Anybody can start a subtitling business, although dubbing, I think there's some knowledge base you might need because you need studios and you need access to the voice talents and all. But once it becomes bigger and bigger, especially as you scale up, we deal with about 600,000 running time hours of video on an annual basis. It's a very highly, and you have to manage about, 40,000 voice talents, 40,000 translators on an annum. I mean, it's a massive process, sort of a digital supply chain management process, and we built a lot of technologies to manage that. Well, that's our end of, our perspective on how we manage a business at this scale. But in a client perspective, I think, and you asked me why we grew to where we are, as OTT rolled out, and it may be a longer story than a short answer, but as you know, Korean contents and contents all over the world are being acquired, and with OTTs, rolling out globally, now they require 40 languages instead of 5 languages or 2 languages, right? So the complexity of managing the distribution of contents on a global level to those countries, from various countries to various countries, and just purely managing that has become a major problem for our clients, for the studios. So they need bigger players that they could fully rely on, a one-stop shop, rather than having to manage 100 different vendors around the world, if you can see.
Yep. And you were able to provide that
I
service.
think we were at the right place at the right time.
이 연못안에 시신이 몇 구가 있을 것 같으냐?
너 원하는 게 뭔데 도대체?
다시 모으면 되잖아. 이 사업으로.
무궁화 꽃이 피었습니다입니다.
그 옛날에 어릴 때 하는 거 말이야?
Il nous dit que nous devons être plus vertueux.
Lass meine Hand nicht los. Versprichst du mir das? Sie kommen.
A lot of people relate what you do with the growth of Korean content. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've definitely rode on the wave of Korean content for sure. Not just because we've grown out of Korea. Of course, during the early days, the Korean content's going global. We've been able to benefit from that a lot because, as being a Korean originated international vendors, we got a lot of those Korea outbound businesses for localization. But then I think more importantly, Korean content's boom has also triggered, international broadcasters or for example, Hollywood studios to actually be interested in creating more contents out of US. And for companies like us who are based out of 34 countries, it makes a lot more strategic value for us to our clients then, because they need vendors or partners who are actually physically based there so that they can work with those content partners that they're using. So for example, if Disney's producing a content in Korea, they'd need a vendor who could communicate directly with the studios and the people in Korea in their own respective languages so that they could streamline the processes of that very complex distribution process.
So it's not just translating a product that's already out there, but really trying to get communication lines open so that those kind of products can be produced.
Yeah, ourselves, we call the end-to-end distribution partner for our clients. So once the content is finished, or even before it's finished, we receive so-called prelims, which are pre-release materials, just because to speed up the process, because dubbing takes a lot of time and so on. But we take the final videos, and after that, it's translation, it's subtitling, like I said, text on video, it's dubbing, voice on video, or even compliance editing, which is, this content has scenes where people are eating pork. We don't want these, our clients don't want these to be aired in Muslim countries. And then there are political scenes where it needs filtering, so these censorship editings, and so on. And then we do those in versionings, package it, and deliver to our clients. That may be one window, or it can be, our clients may be delivering to 10 different windows, like if they want to deliver to Facebook, iTunes, and Amazon, and they all require different specifications, and we're the so-called gatekeeper in terms of that quality control.
So it is a door-to-door service.
It's a door-to-door, end-to-end, yeah.
Interesting. The other question I wanted to ask about content is that not so far ago, not that many years ago, people used to say, especially in the United States, subtitled content were never going to be popular. But you see Parasite, you see Squid Game. It's changed. Why?
Well, firstly, those films in localization and forms of subtitles were more popular than before, but still, U.S. is a very dubbing.
Yeah.
U.S. viewers much more prefer dubbing, and for Squid Games and all these K-dramas that were popular in U.S., most, if I understand correctly, most of them were watched in English dubbed versions. So I think dubbing is still a preference in U.S. and Europe. I think subtitling has always been a preference in Asia. It's just cultural and legacy traditions that just somehow it just happens to be that way. But then coming back to your question, I think definitely with video streaming services and Squid Games and all, international content, specifically Asian contents that had never been, that had been considered a very niche and ethnic content in the mainstream U.S. or European consumer, viewer market, I think, is now considered, is at a different level now, for sure.
How strong is that win? They call, you talk about a lot of international content, but they're not still at a level where they are shoulder to shoulder with Western content.
I don't know what would be the right metrics to define shoulder to shoulder. Is that viewership, or is that cost efficiency? Definitely in terms of cost efficiency, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
It's a lot lower cost. So a lot of people ask me, why is Korean content more popular than, for example, other Asian contents? I won't name a specific country. Some of the experts in my industry, they tell me these stories, is because Korean contents have the highest production costs than some of the other countries, for example, Japanese contents. So if you can imagine, Korean content's production costs are much, much higher than Japanese. And of course, there are other factors. We have a very strong creative talent base. We have webtoons platforms that have been originated out of Korea, where original stories come out of, and so on. But coming back to the Hollywood contents versus Korean contents, you're looking at 10 times, 20 times production costs. As Korean contents do better,
Their production
the budgets
costs
are going up and the quality of the contents are going up. Eventually, would it be shoulder to shoulder? I don't think that comparison itself is important, but I think we're definitely on a good momentum if we think about where Korean contents are headed.
So Korea is putting more investment into producing high quality content, and therefore, it's sort of
getting better.
it's that cycle.
Yeah. I don't think Korea's putting more money in there. Ironically, I think a lot of international studios are actually funding that rather than native Korean.
Okay. So,
funders.
so you talked about Disney, Netflix, those OTTs.
Yeah.
So if a Western American company, OTT, is the one that's funding Korean content, and not just Korean content, but let's say content from other Asian countries, does that mean that contents are becoming more globalized?
Oh, absolutely.
Or because it is ultimately being done by U.S. companies, OTTs. Does that contradict the two?
Not at all. I think the demand for Korean contents on the global level has been higher than ever. And that enables sort of a competition, not just within the country, but global investors that could be financial institutions, but can also be like OTT streaming services or studios. So they all demand for Korean contents, and that just naturally brings up the budget and so on, and that's a competition. But what enables that is definitely the success of Korean contents for global viewers. And if global streaming providers are benefiting from that popularity of Korean contents, then definitely, it's a motivation for them to put more money into Korean content. So I think it's just that positive cycle that's going on. Yeah.
We'll have to see.
We'll have to see, yeah.
이병, 안, 준, 보.
We're in the age of AI, and we're thinking everything's going to be done by artificial AI machines. Is that where your business is headed?
Well, firstly, in the world of subtitling, we already utilize we've built our own machine translation engine based out of our own data. We've trained our engine just purely from subtitle data. So when you want to use that engine to spit out subtitling, naturally, it's obvious that it's better quality than, for example, Google Translate. So we totally outcompete like any of the off-shelf engines. So we adopted machine translation on our subtitling. So there's a first pass that goes through AI, and then human translators have been edit those or do their translations. But it's more like, I would look at it this way. It's an efficiency tool that would automate a lot of the non-creative aspects of translation. The reason we call content localization instead of content translation is because the purpose of our work is not to deliver the meaning of the foreign language. It's very different. The purpose of our service is to regenerate the user experience that the original content creator intended. So in this scene, if he needs to make people laugh, we need to make people laugh. If he needs to make people cry, we need to regenerate that experience. And that creative aspect is very different than translation. Sometimes it could be translating a humor in a totally different manner. Sometimes it's contextual, and so on. And if it goes on to dubbing, it's even more complex. But to answer your question,
I'm fascinated with that point, because it's a very important point about what your company is doing and what it will do in the future.
Yeah.
Example. I mean, how are you, for example, how can a machine translate not really be able to make a person cry or make a person laugh in one language versus the other?
Well, I think writing a love letter is not about sentences, it's about the context, right? This is how I met you, and it just has that storyline. What I'm trying to say is AI can translate very simple sentences, a little bit more complex sentences.
I love you.
What time are you going to school, and so on. But when it comes to those very creative aspects of subtitling, and I'm just talking about subtitling for now, it's still a very human process. So within our workflow, even if we run through AI, that only replaces like 30% of the whole process. Still 70% has to be done by human. especially when we look at it in a cost savings perspective, we only save like 30% of the cost. So long story short, AI is an efficiency tool in my view, just like we move from typewriters to word processors, it becomes more efficient. I'm not sure if you've tried those Gmails, but nowadays, if you type in sentences, they automatically correct or even automatically finish your sentences. I don't see it more than that, at least at this level of AI. Okay. And I don't want to go too long, but one thing that my friend in this industry has told me is the day AI replaces media localization would be the day when AI-written novels become bestsellers. I still think that creative aspect is going to, stay with the human element.
And you don't think the day that AI written novels will become bestsellers is any time in our near future?
Do you think so?
I hope not.
Well, it's not hope, but I don't think so.
I actually don't want it to be.
I'm a pretty tech-savvy person, but I just don't see how it's possible.
Now, I saw one of your talks where you actually said that AI take the technical responsibility off of people so that they can focus more on creative quality. Yeah. So it is in a way something that helps humans do what they are supposed to do rather than the other way around.
I know there can be other ways or more negative ways to look at it, and I'm not trying to get myself away with that, but it is a coming technology. But for sure, and to be honest, in our process, humans have been involved in non-creative parts of the work as well. And to be true, AI is definitely taking those parts away, whether we want to do it or not. But for sure, I think that creative aspect of what we do, whether it's dubbing or subtitling, still stands very strong. Yeah.
About you, how long have you been? I mean, you've been in this business now.
Started in 2002.
2002.
So it's 21 years now. Yeah.
What was your moment in terms of, okay, I've made it in this business?
Right. I think it was when we acquired SCI during COVID. Yeah.
During COVID?
Yeah, because when I first started business, I used to be a subtitler. And then
you used to be a subtitler yourself?
I used to be a subtitler during my university as a part-timer.
Is that how you started this business?
And then I worked for this company, and then somehow three of us decided to do this for an interim thing before I was going to study in the graduate school. And then, there was just a momentum ongoing, and I just decided, forget about studying overseas. I might as well just want to continue. It's become my permanent career. But you look at the biggest companies in your industry, and it was always STI. And at one point, STI wanted to buy us. It was a long, long time ago. When we were doing about $1 million revenue, and my ask price was $7 million, and I had no investment banking background or whatsoever, and there was this guy who was just laughing at me, and I was embarrassed, by the way, but and those were very early days. But I mean, not that it was a revenge or anything, but I'm just saying STI was the company, like the Apple type company, and when we acquired STI, and we became the one and only global media localizer in this industry. It was a pretty inspiring moment. Just, it's a small and niche industry, but becoming that number one in a certain domain has been a pretty encouraging story.
So, in a sense, you could have been bought out by SDI very early on.
Yeah, I guess we had a few other offers down the road, and maybe I was just too optimistic about our future, which is always the case.
Yeah. So what was your biggest lesson for all of this?
As a founder, there's always people who are not fully, rewarded from that journey. And in that case, you need to build another vision to keep that ongoing. I think for me, there's been hard times, down times and up times, but especially when it comes to down times, when everybody's talking about cost controls and cost cutting and restructuring and mitigations, I think for you to be able to, because I'm good at optimism, bring out a solution, a creative way that everybody can look forward instead of looking backwards, always seem to pay off. So my lesson would be, the good times, great, business is running well, so let's take some time off. Now when the bad time comes, that's when David Lee needs to come forward and do his thing, build another vision and make sure everybody looks forward instead of looking against each other.
Sounds rough.
It sounds rough. Yeah.
And I hope that your vision continues. I mean, that you don't have to come forward too often. That your business grows.
Absolutely.
And you know, the content industry doesn't seem to show any signs of slowing down.
Yeah. The industry is proven to be very resilient against like recession type.
Yeah, and gone through COVID
as well.
wonderfully.
Yeah.
So. Hopefully, it will be better in the future.
Sure.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. This week, we have been talking with David Lee, the CEO and founder of Iyuno SDI Group, which is the world's #1 media localization company. Next week, I will be back with another globalist who is putting Korea on the map. Sun Jie out.